Appalachia has a rich musical heritage of which we've told several stories on our audio podcast about the Bristol Sessions, Tennessee Ernie Ford, and the McGee Brothers of Kingsport, Tennessee. Today we're going to add to those bits of musical history for you. Hello folks, I'm Steve Gilley, along with Rod Mullins, and this is Stories, a History of Appalachia. Now, before we get into this fine story, be sure to go down below if you haven't done so already and click that subscribe button. Ding the bell right next to it so you get updated every time we put out a new story. And if you don't mind, please give us a thumbs up too, okay?
You know, Steve, I'd like to thank the people that have responded and gone to our YouTube page and have responded with comments and, a lot of them very positive comments. And we've gotten a lot of likes on a lot of these. But, we're just telling the story here is what we're trying to do. We're just trying to tell a story. We're not trying to take sides out of it. But, it's something unique. It's something about Appalachian history. It just makes this so special.
And we like to share that with folks, too. I mean, I enjoy telling these stories just as much as I would like watching them. And I hope you folks like to watch them as well. Now, probably the best-known musical group story happens to involve the Carter family from Scott County, Virginia. AP, his wife Sarah, and sister-in-law Maybelle practically invented country music from all the various bits and pieces of Appalachian harmonies and rhythm that surrounded them. It was AP, by the way, who was the wordsmith of the group, writing or collecting songs for the family to record. But it wasn't just AP Carter who was responsible for gathering up all those songs in the area. You'd have to credit the subject of today's podcast, Leslie Riddle. Now, Mr. Riddle was born near Burnsville, North Carolina on June 13th, 1905, then left with his mother to move to Kingsport to live with his grandparents. And Kingsport is where this young African-American grew up, isn't it, Rod?
Yes, it is. Because like most young men at that time, Leslie got what schooling he could, then went out in search of a job. The work he took was mostly manual labor, but it was at one of these jobs that tragedy struck. Riddle was working at the cement plant in Kingsport when one day he tripped on an auger, causing a horrible gash to his right leg. Despite the best efforts to try to work on the leg and the work of the doctors, that injury led to the amputation of his leg at the knee. Well, as he recovered from the loss of his leg and so forth, Leslie Riddle took up the guitar. Now, that was one of the things he did, and he learned how to play it, too. He was a natural at it, too, soon developing a unique style and a unique way of playing. Now, this innovative picking and slide technique was made even more unique when he accidentally shot off two of his fingers. I'm sorry that I'm laughing about that, but inside of strange stories come miracles sometimes. And two of his fingers were shot off by a shotgun accident, requiring him to start using his pocket knife to help him with his playing. And I kind of think you probably know where I'm going with this right now, right, Steve?
We're going to tell you that here in a minute. But I've got to say, the thing about a lot of these musicians, blues musicians, country musicians, is that were it not for the hardships that they went through, and I mean severe hardships like this fella, country music, blues music, rock music would not sound the way it does today. You see, as he learned to play, he soon made the acquaintance of other African-American blues musicians in the Kingsport area, including Steve Tarter, Brownie McGee, and John Henry Lyons. And it was through these men that Riddle met Blind Lemon Jefferson, who had come by Tarter's house when Riddle was there. He soon began to play with these men in Kingsport, and it was at one of these performances in 1928 that Leslie Riddle met AP Carter, who often attended in search of material for the Carter family to record. The two became good friends and collaborators, and soon Leslie was splitting his time between his music in Kingsport and the Carter home place in Mesa Springs, Virginia. It wasn't long before Riddle joined Carter on song collecting trips around East Tennessee, Southwest Virginia, and Western North Carolina, trying to find new tunes for the Carters to record. During these trips, which most often were at African-American communities and churches, Leslie Riddle would act as a, quote, human tape recorder, end quote, memorizing the melody of the songs while AP would write down the lyrics. It was during this time that he made these trips with AP that most of the more well-known Carter family songs were collected, including Cannonball Blues, Hello Stranger, I Know What It Means to Be Lonesome, Lonesome for You, Let the Church Roll On, Bear Creek Blues, and March Wind's Gonna Blow My Blues Away.
Remember that unique playing style we told you about a few minutes ago? Well, Mother Maybelle Carter was highly impressed with it and asked Leslie to teach it to her, which he did, pocket knife and all. And it was that style that Maybelle adopted and adapted to form her own unique style, all her own. Although it was still copied and used by country musicians to this day. Now, try as he might, though, Leslie Riddle was never able to ignite his own career. Even though he had worked with the likes of AP Carter and the Carter family and Brownie McGee, he'd worked with those folks, eventually he gave up the music business, got married in 1937, and moved to Rochester, New York in 1942. There, he sold his guitar and lived and worked a normal life. He might have been totally forgotten, but for a man we've talked about in a previous podcast, and this is the one that kind of surprised me, but then, after I heard the name, it really was no big surprise. Mike Seeger.
You see, in the early 1960s, Mike Seeger had been going around the country looking for folks who'd perform their music, but had never quite made it. He'd found such people as Doc Boggs, who we've talked about in the past in our audio podcast from Norton, and had breathed new life into Doc's career, years after he'd stopped playing and gone back into the mines to work. Mike Seeger had collaborated with Maybelle Carter, who had mentioned Mr. Riddle to him. So in 1965, Seeger located Leslie Riddle in New York and convinced him to come back to recording music. From then until 1978, Riddle and Seeger made a series of studio recordings. And not only that, but Leslie Riddle also made appearances at the Smithsonian Folk Festival and the Mariposa Folk Festival, introducing himself to a large audience.
Leslie Riddle has not been forgotten either. On July 31st, 2009, Leslie, The Life and Music of Leslie Riddle, premiered at the Parkway Playhouse in Burnsville, North Carolina. The playwright, Jeff Douglas Messer, is working on a screenplay and a novel based upon the script. Now, that was at that time. A festival in Riddle's honor was held for several years in Burnsville called Riddle Fest.
Wow. That's a very interesting story. I mean, here's this fella. He's met up with a legend in country music, helped him go around gathering the songs that made AP Carter and the Carter family world famous, royalty in country music, and he ended up working a job in Rochester. But, they brought him back in, and there toward the end of his life, he got a little bit of recognition for all the things he'd done.
And he was kind of hidden, though. I mean, to one degree or another, he was back there. He served a purpose in everything that he did. But, it kind of reminds me a little bit of another country star that, played it very quiet for a long time before he finally hit it on the music scene. Loved to play baseball, wanted to play baseball. That was his first love, but he loved singing country music. Do you know who I'm talking about, Steve?
Who are you talking about?
Charlie Pride.
Oh, yeah.
For many years, there were a lot of radio stations did not know that Charlie Pride was black, and they kept it hid. And then when they sprung it on everybody, Charlie Pride said, yeah, there were a few places that blew their stacks over it, but they said, how could they now that he had made such a big star with some of his hits? And, I'll sit down here occasionally and I'll sing a little bit of a song, and my wife just looks at me like, you're an idiot. Where do you hear that song before and stuff? Kiss an Angel Good Morning. That's the one I have sung to her before, and she's kind of looked at me like, that's the most corny song I've ever heard. I said, but it was a big hit for Charlie Pride.
Yeah. And folks, that's the story of Leslie Riddle, an African-American man partly responsible for the development of country music as we know it. Another story that makes up the history of this place we call home, Appalachia. Thanks for watching. Now, you can subscribe to the audio version of the Stories podcast, get many more stories. You can do that at Apple Podcasts, Good Pods, Radio Public, Stitcher, Spotify, or on any number of podcast apps, all for free. And again, don't forget to click that subscribe button below this video and ding the bell next to it. Till next we meet, y'all take care. So long, everybody.
So long.